So chat, Semiramis. Y'all know this has been the dead horse that I have been beating for like the past year at least. She's been in this state for a lot longer, but for a long time on this stream, y'all heard me talk about Tamamo Lancer. And I said it's like I keep bringing up Tamamo Lancer as why she's like really freaking weak and bad. And I was like, it's not because I hate Tamamo Lancer. It's because I want Tamamo Lancer to be better. Me talking about Semiramis, me always using her as the example of a unit that is in desperate and dire need of a buff, is not because I hate Semiramis. It's because she actually is in desperate and dire need of a buff. Okay? And so I'll talk about it a ton in the hopes of speaking it into reality. And that's where it's like I said, like I'm beating the dead horse. But look, it happened. We finally got it. I even talked about it in the banner review. I said, hopefully this year was the year that we finally got another good Semiramis buff. And that happened. So I'm happy that it did. So you guys can see they took her third skill. And boy almighty, was this skill kind of hot garbage. So it required you to spend 8 stars. And yes, it still had the demerit. It's one of the very few in the game that still had an actual star expenditure attached to it. It inflicted poison for 3 turns to all enemies of 1,000, and then reduced their buster resistance for 3 turns by 50%. I don't have to talk to you enough to know that while, 50% is definitely a really nice, like, card type modifier, buster resist down is not ideal. There are so many units in the game that have magic resistance. There are so many units in the game that are debuff immune. So usually that already just makes trying to debuff a unit a subpar way of doing things. But then when you add in the fact that Semiramis is going to be looked at as an AoE assassin, as somewhat of a farmer, then you start thinking about having a debuff down that cannot be transferred between waves, and this starts to look even worse. So this skill really was in dire need of some help. The devs come in and they help it. So again, still the same poison, still the same buster resist down. However, now it increases her own damage against enemies with poison status for 3 turns. It is a up to 50% power mod. This is good. This affects everything, not just her carding, but also her NP. It also grants her a debuff on attack that inflicts poison for 1,000 damage for 3 turns to enemies when attacking. And it does activate first. So, again, basically, as long as you have the skill popped, anything that you hit the enemy with, boom, there you go. It's going to apply the poison. The only thing will be, because it specifies attacking. Actually, no, it doesn't specify normal attacking. So this should be also the NP. But yeah, so it should be anything. So anything that you hit the enemy with should apply the poison before and then grant her the power mod. This is good. This just essentially gives her 50% power mod on everything. And boy, did she need it. Okay. Take a look here real quick at her actual damage numbers. So on top, you guys can see these are the old numbers. These are the numbers from when Semiramis basically was unbuffed in this regard. These numbers are abysmal and pathetic in so many ways. She is literally somebody as a 5-star that gets beaten by, I think, I'd have to go back and look, but I think it's every single AoE assassin welfare. It's not a good place for her to be. Like, it's okay if the welfares are competing with a 5-star at MP1. It's not okay when they're beating you. And especially the greatest offender to that was Gray. Gray absolutely trounced Semiramis. There was basically no reason to actually have or own a Semiramis because of that. It was not even close, and therefore, if you needed a Buster AoE assassin, you were going to go with Gray, who is already in the Evocation Festival. So it just basically amounted to, yeah, why even bother to roll her? So The reason I bring this up, chat, is because it's important. This is exactly what I mean when I talk about game balance. When you have something like this, where the welfare isn't just stronger, they're so stronger that, again, even getting like NP2 is still not enough of the SSR. Why the fuck would you spend the money? Why would you ever roll? Maybe you really like the character. That's fine. I'm not going to take away anything from somebody that likes Semiramis. But again, when the devs rerun a banner for this unit and they go, why isn't anyone rolling? The answer is right in front of them, and they should know better. And it's wild to me that Semiramis went this long without getting a buff like this, because she desperately and direly needed it. You can see we do have man numbers on here that bring her up to 250, but these are anti-man being provided by Koyanskaya of Light, of which Gray can run with too. So Gray also has the anti-man modifier there. So realistically speaking, these numbers are just flat out pathetic. They're not good in any stretch of the imagination for where a 5-star should be. If you're going to spend money, your hard-earned cash on this, or again, your hard-earned blood, sweat, and tears currency that you had to get out free to play, you want the unit to actually at least be worth that. Semiramis was not, at least not until this buff. This buff does really help things along, but frankly, she could still get better if you ask me. Like I said, even adding a 50% power mod to Semiramis, while it definitely helps, I'm not sure it's necessarily going to be a like world-breaking phenomenon or like drastic change because of the way that she kind of ends up working. Again, you can see she's still only able to start with a 50% C. That's still fine to a degree, but yes, you definitely don't have like some skyrocketing amount of numbers. It is good, but her original numbers were already so bad that this is now just passable numbers. It's not like, oh my god, this is the best AoE assassin by any stretch of the imagination. So I like this buff. It is a good buff, but it's still just a step in the right direction. She's now worthy of attention, but it's more so she's now usable when compared to other units. She was so far behind at this point that, yeah, they had to do something just to get her back in the running. Yep. So here is Cleo. And Cleo is, again, way more of a challenge unit, I would say. And this is Koyanskaya of Light, who has the ability to have her own power mods as well. So again, more damage there. And there it is, chat. So here's Semiramis with poison. Here's Gray with you doing basically nothing. This does use a level 100 Summer Anniversary, which is a 60% CE. So this is rarer. You might have a harder time pulling this number with Gray, but you can see Gray still in her optimal setup will beat her, and that's not even including the anti-undead. So like I said, does this buff help Semiramis? Yeah, she's now in the conversation. She's in the same ballpark as the other units. She just hasn't hit it out of the ballpark. Because, frankly, she had to walk just to get to the ballpark to be able to play in the same game as the rest of them. That's the issue that we had with Semiramis. Her numbers from before were so atrociously bad that, realistically speaking, there was no reason to roll for her. Now, at least these numbers, which we can replicate just about all the time, will be better. But she still has the issue of, again, she's highly debuff reliant. And so if you can't land poison on the enemy, if you can't debuff them with the 50% buster down, this gets kind of hairy for Semiramis. So does Semiramis still need more after this? Yes. Yes, she still does. And I hate that I have to say that, but it is the truth. Semiramis does still need more, especially if they want her to, again, pull ahead and actually get some attention and be a bright spot for the assassins. Right now, she just now has come from all the way behind to literally kind of being in the mix. Kind of like God Juna relies on his Buster Down for his big damage on his NP. Yeah. Yeah, so the difference comparatively with God Juna, right? Probably easier to just go about it this way. Okay. So remember, he increases his own damage against enemies that have debuffs on them for 3 turns, right? That's fine. Thing is, this is a buff to him. So all that's required is that you land a debuff on the enemy to get this extra 50% power mod. It can be any debuff. It does not have to be one of his. But obviously it's optimal if it is his. So with every NP activating first, he does Buster Down. How is this different from Semiramis? Semiramis gets this from a skill one time. This is why if you look at the actual numbers for Semi, you'll notice the 2-turn dip. Because in a Koyanskaya composition, we're activating this skill on turn 1 and on turn 3. So we don't have debuffs on turn 2, which is really stupid and really bad. That's what I'm saying. A lot of this has to do with how they originally designed her. Semiramis just naturally had a kind of worse design kit, at least for conventional use in 3-turn farming and the Koyanskaya system. Thing is, Semiramis doesn't exactly scream challenge orientation because she doesn't have a hard defense skill anywhere in the kit. So at that point, the best thing she has is the ability to, again, negate caster class advantage against her. That's fine, but like, yeah, it's not the same as having an invuln or an evasion or a guts, right? So to me, I think realistically speaking, Semi still could use some love, because this third skill, even though they have adjusted most of the issues with it, it's still something where it's like, yeah, you're going to move to another wave and then the Buster Down's not going to apply. So that's going to be the issue that I have with it. Sure, you could take her into a scenario where maybe it's AoE and it's a challenge environment. You're up against the same units for multiple turns. That's fine. In that case, then her Buster Down would be good since it's 3-turn duration, and you might be able to get back to it again and stack it within those 3 turns. So that could be good. It's just, this is not the conventional place that Semiramis is used in, nor do I really expect that to be the case all that much to begin with anyways. So to me, yeah, Semiramis still needs to get way better. And hey, Avalon, could you run me one more set of numbers real fast? Just because I think this will prove my point. Yeah, that's... All right. There you go, chat. Now, here's the thing. These are neutral. These are neutral numbers, which means that Semiramis's numbers are also neutral. So this means that if we take this into a scenario where Semiramis is actually effective, so riders, you get to take this number and you get to multiply that by 2. So instead of 230, that number is now 460. Not bad. Chat, she still wins without even doing the calculation for alter ego. Do you understand why we have a problem now with balance in the game? Power Black Grail during events doesn't matter too much, though. That is true. That is a good point, right? So it's like if you start to take out Black Grail and the synergy with Oberon, this number is going to come down quite a bit. But like I said, this number is actually neutral, so you still get to multiply it by 1.5. So even if we reduce this for Black Grail, you'll probably stronger. Like I said, this is a huge issue that they face at this point. They have made some of these units way too fucking strong. So Semiramis is struggling just to compete with her own class. Her own class in its entirety is struggling to compete against Tiamat. And this is just a problem. Using her against foreigners, it's 2 times, right? Yeah. Yeah, foreigner is the actual niche. But, like, yeah, it's just... This is a huge issue. I'm happy with the Semiramis buff. I don't want to make it seem like I'm not. It's a good buff. But one, they could have gone further with it, and it would not have made Semiramis broken. And two, because they didn't, she now needs another one. But to be fair, just about everybody that's not a welfare needs another one for the assassins at this point. It's a good buff, but it could have been so much better. I think attaching a 50% power mod to something that did not exist before. So literally just walking up to a unit and saying, you get 50% more in modifiers that increase your damage. I think that's like really all you can expect out of a buff. Like you can't expect them to go more than that just at the drop of a hat. Like, I'm fine with that. Honestly, most of the time we'd be lucky to see a 20% buff. So a 50% buff is like, damn, they really tried. And they did. But they can't help the fact of this is the state that Semiramis was already in. If they just got rid of the 0.9 assassin mod, I mean, it would help, but it wouldn't make that big of a difference in the grand scheme of things. Like I said, so the weird part about this is Tiamat is so damaging that Tiamat is basically like the strongest alter ego by far as well too, right? So at that point, it's not an alter ego versus assassin issue like most people try to frame it. It's actually just a insane power creep Tiamat issue versus everyone else. That's really what's going on here. It's less it's less like, oh, this is a difference in class. Let Bazette deal with it. Yeah, Bazette can definitely do it. Tiamat can still come out on top at 0.5. Yeah, to some of the relatively like unbuffed knight classes. Is she currently the strongest servant in the game? I think that's up for debate because it really depends on what qualifications you say. And you can actually make units stronger than Tiamat, which is fucking nuts, but it is what it is. Honestly, I think it's good she's at least usable now. I mean, she was technically usable before. It's not like her kit made her unusable. It's more that there was no reason to use Semiramis outside of, hey, I just really like this character. Like, Semiramis did nothing wholly unique or good that would make you want to take Semiramis, other than maybe, like, again, the effect that she has in the second skill here, right? The disadvantage against casters. But, like, God almighty, I don't really know why you would want to take her up against casters, because this has a 3-turn limited duration. If you can't get the job done in 3 turns, congratulations, you took an assassin to a caster fight. She's worse than the support needed to run her. Yeah, I mean, quite literally, right? Like, there's your Koyanskaya composition. Like, Koyanskaya could be worse, but only if these things are true. 起動